friends, Elizabeth here. Another month has come and gone, and an extra couple weeks. Sorry, I'm a bit behind. But I've read several more books that I want to talk to you about. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you all the books I finished in February, my thoughts, feelings, rating, review, and hopefully managed to be a little bit more concise, especially because most of the books I finished in February, I've actually already reviewed in other videos on my channel, mainly the Goodreads Choice Awards winners video and my fantasy reading vlog. So I'm going to do my best to not repeat myself and give you new information and also be sort of quick and snappy about it. So you can just get a bit of an overview of my reading in the month of February and how it went. So in February, I finished 16 books. Before you tell me that that's ridiculous and how could I even do that, keep in mind that one of those was a short story and 5 of those were volumes of a graphic novel, and volumes tend to be pretty short and quick to get through, so maybe a little bit more reasonable than you might be thinking off the top of your head. I'm not going to go through all my stats in this video. I am keeping stats for my reading journal videos, which you might have noticed I haven't shared my January reading journal setup yet, or my February. I am behind. I'm trying to figure out my life, okay? I'm trying to make more content for you this year, but it's definitely a lot of time and work and effort. So yeah, we're figuring it out. It's a process. We'll get there. I'll get there. But I do have plans to share those setups. I'll probably do January and February combined, and then after that, try to do each month separately. But just for curiosity's sake, editing me will add my average rating for everything I finished in February, just because I'm curious to see where I land, because I feel like it was all over the place this month, okay? Lots of highs and lots of lows. Let's start with the first book I finished in February, which was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. And in my Goodreads Choice Awards video, I reviewed it and talked about how I felt. I did give this book 3 stars. I thought it was good, but not great, and I had a lot of issues with it. But in my Goodreads Choice Awards review, it totally slipped my mind that this was always meant to be a duology, and this second book is supposed to be the end of this series. Because this book had such an inconclusive ending that did not feel satisfying at all, in my mind, I guess I rewrote history and decided it was book 2 in a trilogy, which it's not. So that actually makes me more disappointed with this book and more disappointed in the ending because it felt so anticlimactic and like so many things were left unexplored. Like I said, this is YA fantasy and this takes place in a Victorian-esque setting with magic, but the magic is a bit nebulous. We never fully understand how the magic works. It seems like the average person does not have magic, but certain areas of the land have more connection to magic and they're able to utilize it in their technology. There are also gods who are real and are on the planet and can be met and interacted with. And our protagonists meet and fall in love with the use of magical typewriters who are able to kind of send letters to each other no matter where they are. I really liked the first book. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really sweet. I thought it was wholesome. I thought the world was interesting, if a little underdeveloped. I thought the magic typewriters was a cute idea, if again, maybe a little underexplained. And I found it pretty exciting, pretty well paced. I liked the characters. I liked the romance. This second book kind of resets a lot of things, and it feels like for the majority of the book, we're just rehashing things that happened in the first book, which was frustrating as a reader to feel like we took 10 steps back and now we're just trying to get back to the place we were at the end of the first book so we can then take steps forward. And once we did finally get to the point where we could move forward with the plot and the conflict and this war between gods and getting our characters back together, everything just happened so fast and everything was described in a very vague manner. Nothing was as tense or scary or fast-paced or high stakes as you would expect it to be, and everything just fell a little flat for me. I feel like all of that makes it sound like I disliked the book. I didn't dislike it while I was reading it. It was fine. I just kind of felt like it was dragging from the first 2/3, and then the third went really fast, but wasn't as, fast-paced, engaging, exciting, intense as I would expect. It just sort of everything was happening all at once, and then it was done, and I just sat there thinking, oh, it's over? That's it? Okay. And then of course I rewrote reality and told myself there was going to be a 3rd book, which would then, give us more of a satisfying ending and kind of finish things off properly. But turns out that's probably not happening. So I really don't know how to feel, to be honest. I think 3 stars is still fair because I didn't dislike reading it. I didn't dislike the story or the characters. I just felt like it was a really unsatisfying way to end this story and was too repetitive, brought back too much from the first book. Without bringing much to the table, it kind of felt like a waste of a book, to be honest. And if this was where things were going, I don't understand why the first book couldn't have just been a standalone. It probably could have been just a touch longer and it could have been all in one book. I don't know. Maybe now that I've realized it's a duology, I'm leaning more towards lowering my rating to 2 stars, but that feels a little harsh or a little unfair because I didn't dislike the book. I just felt like it could have been a couple chapters, you know? It could have been an email, it could have been a telegram instead of a whole book, you know? I don't know. I don't know how to feel. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I was really looking forward to this series sort of exploding and getting way more intense and expanding the world, and developing the characters and their relationships further. And yeah, it just felt too much of the same thing over and over and over again, and not enough stakes and not enough story. Not enough story for me, sadly. So that's Ruthless Vows. Like I said, I am really impressed by the volume of books I've been reading this year, but I'm definitely noticing that I'm spending more time reading and less time on self-care. And that's where the sponsor of this video, Ladder, comes in. Ladder is a strength training app unlike any other. These aren't influencer plans or challenges. This is the real deal. Workouts designed by professionals with your goals in mind. The ways that I'm most consistently getting exercise these days are cardio, like the walking pad I use at my standing desk, and mobility or flexibility work through yoga. One thing that I am terrible at prioritizing is strength training, and that's why I'm so grateful to have Ladder in my life. Ladder is a strength training app that gives you a plan every single day. No more random workouts, no more guesswork at the gym. It's like having a personal trainer at your beck and call in your pocket. Plus, it costs less than $1 a day. From videos to demos, in-ear coaching to guide you, a journal that tracks your progress and weights, and a real community, including a coach who is there to answer your questions. Ladder is there to support you no matter what your specific goals are. For me, it's really about building strength, making sure that I can handle anything life throws at me, and make sure that I maintain strength around my joints so I can really support them, because I definitely struggle with hypermobility. Ladder is the solution for everyone who is spending their precious time exercising but not seeing results. I decided to join the Define team, focusing on Pilates and strength training using minimal equipment, but there are so many options, meaning that you can really tailor the experience to you and your needs. I love how easy the app is to use and that it connects to my smartwatch so I can keep track of where I am in the exercises and be notified when it's time to move on to the next. Because Ladder is sponsoring this video, you can get up to 33% off with the link in my description box. So click that link and get up to 33% off your Ladder subscription. Strength training is so important, and Ladder makes it fun, which I have not said about any other plan, maybe ever. Next up, I read The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, and this was the mystery thriller winner in the Goodreads Choice Awards. So again, check out that video for a more thorough review. But basically, this is the story of a child who goes missing in the woods in the 70s during camp, and people trying to find said child who went missing. And it was very boring. I didn't think the story of a missing child could be so boring, but apparently it can. This was very long, not a lot happened, and the most boring part was definitely the whole investigation and revealing what happened and trying to also reveal the mystery of a past disappearance and tie everything together, which probably should have been the most engaging and immersive and intense and fast-paced section of the book, but it really wasn't. It just, everything took so long. There were so many characters that I could not bring myself to care about. And I think the thing that I was most excited for when I read the description of this book was that the setting seemed like it would be really immersive. Like I would really have that strong sense of place of being in the woods in the 70s, the wilderness. And I just felt like the author did nothing with that. I was not made to feel like I was there with the characters. I couldn't envision what things looked like and what the sounds of the forest were and how things smelled and how the ground felt beneath my feet with snapping branches and moss and little animals scurrying through the brush. There was just none of that atmospheric quality that I was really expecting, and it felt a little overwritten for me. So unfortunately, this just wasn't for me. It didn't really deliver anything I hoped for from it. I also really didn't like the ending. So that's God of the Woods. I gave this one 2 stars. It just wasn't for me. Next up, I finished Heartstopper Volume 1 by Alice Oseman. I did talk about the whole series, or all 5 volumes, kind of as a whole in my Goodreads Choice Awards video. I'll try to talk about each book separately a little bit in this video, but again, try to be brief and not repeat myself too much. I loved this. I gave it 5 stars. In this first volume, we're introduced to the characters. Charlie, who's our main protagonist, and he is gay. He was outed at school, so he is out as a gay boy. He is 15, I think, in the first book. So Charlie is assigned a seat next to a guy from a grade ahead of him, and Charlie is feeling a bit of trepidation in sitting near Nick. He's a rugby lad, and he seems like the kind of guy who would have, gotten himself involved in the bullying when Charlie was outed. So he's really sort of guarding himself, but they slowly develop this friendship over time and get to know each other and realize that they actually have a lot in common and they really enjoy each other's company. And Charlie starts developing a crush on Nick, and his best friend is like, dude, do not fall for a straight boy. Please do not fall for a straight boy. And Charlie's like, what are you talking about? I'm not falling for him. We're just friends. While he blushes and kicks his feet. And at the same time, Nick is kind of also developing a crush, which is very confusing for him because he always thought he was straight. So he's, not sure what's going on and doesn't really recognize it as a crush necessarily. The way it ends is both really sweet and really stressful and sad. And I was glad I could jump into the next volume right away because the story as a whole was really relatable and sweet and wholesome, but that ending was devastating because there was a bit of a miscommunication and both of them are feeling really confused and worried that they've ruined their friendship, and it's just really stressful. Like I said, I gave this 5 stars. I thought it was so sweet and really liked the characters. They were very vivid, felt very real. They felt very much like high school kids. It felt super relatable and realistic. And I felt a lot of sort of giddy nostalgia for some of my early crushes. Just that feeling of really, really, really liking spending time with someone, but not necessarily recognizing right away that that is actually an attraction to them and wanting to date them versus just really wanting to be their friend. So anyway, that was Heartstopper Volume 1. I thought it was really sweet. And like I said, I gave it 5 stars. The next book I finished in February was Daughter of Fire. This was our book club pick for January, actually, but I finished it in the first week of February. And I liked this, but I didn't love it. I gave this 3 stars. I thought it was good. I have complicated feelings about this one. I didn't dislike it. I enjoyed the book overall, but there were a lot of things that didn't quite perfectly click for me personally. I think the biggest thing for me is that it did read very YA, which is fine. I just went into it expecting it to be adult. So the tone was not exactly what I expected. Our protagonist is also a lot younger from the beginning and kind of all the way through the narrative than I had initially expected. She's 16 when the book starts. But there's also a little bit of a melodramatic quality, especially in the romantic subplot that was not really my cup of tea. It just felt a little over the top and a little cliche or tropey at times. I did find the main storyline, this idea of our protagonist who is a, girl of 2 worlds. Her mother was Mayan, native Guatemalan, and her father is important in the Spanish government of the colonizers who have come to the land and massacred the native population. So she feels pulled in 2 directions, to her 2 cultures, to her 2 parents. And over the course of the novel, she is trying to remember and write down and preserve the Popol Vuh, which is a important religious and cultural text of the Mayans that her family line was meant to be the protectors of, the keepers of this knowledge. And her mother spent a lot of time when she was young telling her stories and having her memorize different portions of the Popol Vuh. So she is working really hard to restore it after something devastating happens because it's so important to the remaining Mayans to have that connection to their religious practices and their cultural memory. And I actually have the Popol Vuh on my shelves. I bought this prior to this being picked as our book club pick. I've been wanting to read this. This is the Mayan book of creation, essentially. And this book, Daughter of Fire, is based on the real life history that the Popol Vuh was written by 3 anonymous authors who were never identified. And basically, Daughter of Fire is trying to envision who those 3 people might have been and what were their experiences trying to record this vital knowledge. Who might they have been? What were their motivations to take the risk to to write out the Popolvuh at a time that they could have been put to death for practicing a religion other than Catholicism. So my favorite parts of this novel were the passages where they were recreating, sort of retelling stories of the Popolvuh. They had a very supernatural, surreal, dream-like quality to them and were written in a different style. I found those really interesting, and they made me want to pick the actual Popolvuh up as soon as possible. The rest of the book was not as much my cup of tea writing style-wise. I think it was mostly just a mismatch of my expectations, thinking this was an adult book. I did not like the romance. I did not like the romantic lead, the male character. I thought he was kind of the worst. He was pretty terrible. Not only in that he was very not understanding of Catalina's experience as a mixed race girl, straddling the line between two cultures, both colonizer and the colonized, and she is stuck between two worlds in a time in the 1500s Guatemala where women don't have a lot of autonomy or rights or the ability to really set out on their own and carve their own path. So she does have to obey her father and obey her father's rules. The judgment and also the misogyny from the male love interest made it really hard for me to root for him and for them together. It has a little bit of an enemies to lovers kind of trajectory, which is not my favorite in general. But again, like I find in a lot of YA that tries to employ this trope, it so often goes from bickering and hating each other to lust and love with so little transition time, with so little explanation for why and how and when they have had this change of heart, that it's really hard to believe and for me to get invested in. And I felt that way here as well. Another thing that I really appreciated about this book was something that happened later on. I won't go into too much detail because it's a bit of a spoiler, but a character in the story experiences a traumatic brain injury, and that really impacts how they can live their life and their ability to communicate and to take care of themselves. And I felt that was really well done. It wasn't something I necessarily expected going into this, but it does seem like it ties into the author's own experiences in her career. That felt very well researched and very realistic, and it really made me connect to that character much more deeply. It felt like that was the most real the character ever felt, was when we were following them trying to recover and regain the ability to communicate and care for themselves after that injury. Like I said, this was our book club pick, and in our discussion that I think was close to 3 hours long, some people didn't like that happened because they felt like it was a little bit out of nowhere and it sort of derailed the story a bit in the last quarter of the book or so. And yes, that's probably true. It definitely felt like it kind of came out of nowhere and added a really different tone to the end of the book, but it was probably my favorite part of the book outside of the times that they were recreating the Popolvuh or sort of retelling the stories. So for me, I really liked it, and it made my experience of the book better, and I ended on a much more positive note. I appreciated the book more because that was included, but I can definitely agree that it feels a little disjointed from the rest of the narrative. I do think if you're interested in reading about Guatemala, especially in this time, I think it's set in around 1550, this could be really interesting to you. Like I said, it really made me want to pick up and read the actual Popolvuh. It made me excited to read it. And it was, an interesting enough story. It was a pretty quick read. There's a bit of commentary on colonization and genocide, identity, and when you come from multiple identities and trying to marry that together or carve out your own path, resistance, religious persecution, misogyny and sexism and women's place in society, and trying to find a way to exist and survive and thrive under an oppressive patriarchal system. And there's also discussion of assimilation and maintaining or holding on to your cultural identity and to the religious texts and cultural practices and important cultural memory that ties your community together even under an occupying force. So there's a lot there thematically. I think it could have gone deeper into any and all of the themes, but this was also a debut novel as far as I remember, and I think overall it was good and I enjoyed it. So, I have lots of thoughts and feelings, and it's not a new favorite book of all time, but I did enjoy reading it, and I felt we had a really great, really fascinating conversation about the book in the book club, which is always my favorite thing and what I hope for from book club picks. So that was Daughter of Fire, and like I said, I gave it 3 stars. The next book I finished is actually a short story collection, You Like It Darker by Stephen King. I also read this for my Goodreads Choice Awards video. I'll direct you there for more detail because I did share each story and my rating of each. I'll just say here that I liked this collection. I liked some stories more than others, as you might expect. This is now my third short story collection that I've read of his, and a couple of the stories in this collection are sitting in my top 5 to 10 of any short stories I've read from him. And I liked that thematically this collection had a lot more to do with aging and loss and memory and morality and grief, and had sort of a quiet, contemplative quality to it. I think overall this is a really great collection, and if you haven't tried any Stephen King, you might find it more accessible to start with a short story collection over one of his super long novels, so I would definitely recommend it. When I averaged my ratings for all the stories, I came to 3.5 stars, and I rounded up to 4 because I really enjoyed the collection overall. Next up, I finished Heartstopper Volume 2, which also got 5 stars. In this collection, Nick discovers his sexuality. He realizes he's bisexual and starts doing a little bit more research into what that means and starts to try to understand himself. He also comes out to some important people in his life and gets some lovely support, and he and Charlie start dating more properly. This was so sweet and definitely touched me on a deeper level. I talk about this more in the Goodreads Choice Winners video, but I felt like this book particularly was very touching to me and very sort of healing for my inner child to watch a character come to terms with their bisexuality at a young age and get that love and support and feel confident in themselves and find love at an early age. It's just something that I really needed to read and I wish I'd had when I was a teenager. A lot of the feelings Nick was feeling were very relatable to me, although I didn't go through that experience until my 20s. And I just loved this one. Maybe of all 5 volumes, this is the one that touches me the most or felt the most personal to me. And like I said, I really loved it and gave it 5 stars. Because I loved Volume 2 so much, I immediately jumped into Volume 3. So next I finished Volume 3 of Heartstopper, and it also got 5 stars. This one I took very few notes about. In this one, Nick starts to realize that Charlie has some disordered eating patterns and has been self-harming on and off in his life, and Nick starts to feel pretty worried about Charlie and wondering how he could help him. And I also have a history of disordered eating, and so I found this hit really close to home, and I was just happy to read a story where it's acknowledged and treated with thoughtfulness and respect, and that the characters around Charlie are really trying to support him and help him in any way they can, and trying to do so in as non-judgmental a way as possible. I thought it was really well done, really well handled, and I also feel like we started to get to know more of the peripheral characters better in this book, and I love all of them. They're all great. So again, this was another 5-star read for me. Before I jumped into the final 2 volumes of Heartstopper, I forced myself to finish The Anxious Generation, which was the nonfiction winner for the Goodreads Choice Awards. I am not even going to start talking about this because I will rant about it for an hour and this video will be too long, and I'll just say all the things that I already said in my review in the Goodreads Choice video. Please go watch that if you want my review. It is a long rant because I hated this book. I gave it 1 star. I thought it was terrible on so many levels, and I really, really, really disliked it. And I think one thing I said in my Goodreads video that I can say here as just a way to summarize my thoughts, I was shocked that I could agree so much with the basic premise of a nonfiction book with the theory that is being presented, and then hate the book so much and disagree with every possible argument the author made for the basic theory that I agreed with. And that was the case here. This is supposed to be a book about how social media is harming kids and teens and making their mental health worse, and how we should not allow kids to be on social media until they're older and encourage them to spend more time outside, which, yeah, sure, I agree with that. Great idea. But like I said, every single argument, every chapter, basically everything the author said in support of their argument, I completely disagreed with, and much of it made me very angry. So check out the Goodreads Choice video for the rant. There are chapters on that video, so you can just click to The Anxious Generation, to the nonfiction category, and watch that rant and not watch the rest of the video if it's not relevant to you. But I just, for my own mental health and also for the length of this video, cannot allow myself to get back into it because, like I said, I will just rant for probably another hour, and I can't do that to myself. So The Anxious Generation was 1 star. Then, luckily, I had a much better experience finishing Heartstopper. I read Volume 4 and Volume 5, and Volume 4 is getting much more deep into Charlie's mental health, talking about his eating disorder, OCD, and his self-harm, and him getting help, which was a very hard read. It was really intense. Again, I think it was handled with a lot of thoughtfulness and a lot of respect and kindness and compassion, which I really appreciated. And I again feel like reading this as a teenager might have helped me a lot to recognize some of the disordered eating habits I was developing at that age before things really escalated in my 20s. So just keep that in mind, that this is a very difficult book to read. It really does dive into Charlie's mental health. But again, I thought it was handled really beautifully, and I gave it 5 stars. And then the final volume that is out so far, which is Volume 5, and this is the volume that won the Goodreads Choice Awards for YA fiction. This one is all about Nick and Charlie trying to determine what the next steps for their relationship are going to be, because Nick is a year older than Charlie and is now getting ready to apply to university. And them not knowing, is he going to stay local? Is he going to go further afield? Are they going to have to be long distance? How are they going to handle that separation if they do? And it's also them taking the next step in their intimacy. And again, I felt that that was really well handled, very thoughtfully, realistically handled, and felt very age appropriate for the characters and also teens of a similar age reading it to learn a bit more or relate to characters who are starting to explore their sexuality in, again, a very age appropriate way, which I thought was great. I thought it was really well handled. I think teens should have books accessible to them where teens their own age are exploring their sexuality in a safe way with a lot of focus on respect and consent and boundaries, communication, and supporting each other. And I felt like Nick and Charlie did a great job of really focusing on their boundaries and respect and caring for each other and consent. And I think that's important for teens. So I thought this was lovely as well, very heartwarming, very sweet. And they're starting to, deal with maybe more adult adjacent issues in their relationship and trying to figure out how to navigate those things and to support each other and to be open with each other and honest and work through everything that comes up. And I just think that that's really lovely. So another 5-star read for me. I imagine I will also give the last volume 5 stars, but we'll wait and see, I guess. Next up, I finished The Bookshop by Evan Friss. This was the winner in the History and Biography category for the Goodreads Choice Awards. And this one I just thought was pretty boring. I gave it 3 stars. This book didn't give me what I expected. I talk about it more again in that video, not to continue to repeat myself, but I thought this was going to be more of a meta-analysis of bookstores and the history of bookstores and how bookstores have evolved over time and what that says about our culture, our society, readers in general, the publishing industry. And instead it was sort of like a listicle or a blog post sharing, top 10 bookstores to visit in the US and also, historic bookstores that don't exist anymore but are cool. And that just wasn't really what I was looking for, nor did I find it overly engaging. So I give it 3 stars. I didn't think it was terrible. It just wasn't what I expected of it and wasn't what I was looking for. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just not what I personally thought it was going to be or wanted. So 3 stars. It was fine. And then after that, I finished The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, which I read as a consolation prize in the fantasy category. This was just fine. I gave it 3 stars. I think this book had a lot of potential, but I just feel like it didn't go anywhere. It takes place during the Spanish Inquisition, and our protagonist is Jewish and has to hide her background and pretend to be Catholic so that she isn't persecuted. And she also has magic that is tied to her heritage. And so she has to also hide her magic in fear that that would be seen as evidence that she is in league with the devil or something. But she's working as a servant and her magic is discovered and she starts being trotted out as a bit of a show pony for impressing her, employer's friends. And things escalate and she gets entered into a competition to find the king's next magical assistant. I think in some ways I liked this. I thought the magic was interesting. I thought there was a lot of potential thematically and with the setting, but I found the characters pretty bland. The romance was not my thing at all, to be honest. It's another, barely adult girl falling in love with a ancient all-powerful male being. And I also just felt like the end kind of fell apart. Things started moving pretty fast, but it didn't all make sense. It didn't all feel super connected. It felt like the book was maybe rushed in the writing or in the editing, I don't know, but it just didn't really feel fully thought out, fully developed. It felt like the first third was much more well-paced and detailed and intricately or carefully crafted, and the last 2/3 of the book felt sort of slapped together. So I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was fine. I didn't hate it. But I also didn't love it, didn't think it was that well done, and really felt like it fell apart in the end, which is unfortunate. Just didn't deliver for me. Next, I finished To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monoquill Blackgoose, and this was the first book I read for my fantasy reading vlog, which is linked in the description box for you to check out. And again, I'll try to be brief because I gave very, very thorough spoiler and non-spoiler reviews for all the books in that video, but I really liked this one. I gave it 4 stars. It definitely reads more like YA, just with the ages of the characters and the writing style, but really cool, interesting magic system, dragons, and the dragons are awesome. Great personalities, really funny and charismatic. The characters are sweet. There's a bit of a romance, and I really liked everyone involved in the romance. There's bisexual representation. There is the potential for polyamorous representation. And all the characters felt very layered and complex. Their relationships felt very realistic. And the ending was a touch rushed, a little bit more telling than showing, but I thought the plot was interesting all the way through. I liked all the themes that were being explored and the fact that this was a Indigenous protagonist tying in Indigenous culture and beliefs in with a fantasy world with dragons and exploring the themes that come along with that of colonization and racism and assimilation. I thought this book was really well done overall, and my few little quibbles are things that can very easily be explained by this being a debut, and I'm very, very excited to read on in this series. So I give it 4 stars. If you want a much more thorough review, including spoilers, check out that reading vlog, but I think this is great and I would highly recommend it. Oh, I just did that whole thing without holding it. I do have the book on my shelves. So definitely check out To Shape a Dragon's Breath if you're looking for more dragon books, more fantasy. The protagonist is 15. She does come across older than that. She seems a bit older than that, but it is, you know, sort of straddling the line, I would say, between YA and new adult. So just keep that in mind. But I thought this was really great, very unique for dragon fiction, and doesn't fall into a lot of the tropes that are very common in a lot of the dragon fantasy that I've been trying to read lately. So I really appreciated that. Next up, I read a sci-fi short story from one of my favorite speculative fiction authors, N.K. Jemisin, Emergency Skin. And this is, like I said, a very short story, and I don't want to spoil it, so I'll really have to be careful what I say. But basically, this is exploring a situation where climate destruction caused a subset of the 1% to escape the planet, to sort of save themselves and colonize a different planet and try to survive there and to reinforce their beliefs that are very patriarchal, misogynistic, racist, to uphold the white cis male standard, and to only send emissaries back to Earth every once in a while to collect samples that they need to sustain their life. And they believe that they left the Earth behind and everyone died. And that's it, you know, that they're the only survivors and they're building their ideal society somewhere else. And when this emissary arrives on Earth, they discover that what they've been told is maybe not entirely true, and things are unraveled from there. And just like with everything else I've read by N.K. Jemisin, this is very thematically focused. This was written for a purpose. It had themes to explore, and I thought they were very interesting and very well done considering how short this is. And I find it really ironic that there are 1-star reviews of this story calling it racist and misogynistic and fatphobic and classist, when those are all the things that N.K. Jemisin is exploring, and obviously pointing out that those things are not good. So anyway, reading critically is important. Understanding of commentary and satire are, you know, apparently dying arts, but they are important. And just because a made-up society or a character in a book say something, that doesn't mean that that is what the author believes. So anyway, I thought this was great. I gave it 5 stars. In my mind, N.K. Jemisin can do no wrong. This was very short, but I thought it was effective, and I really enjoyed reading it. Next up, I finished a horror novel, Listen to Your Sister, and this book is really about sibling relationships and about the parentification of an elder sibling. In this case, the older sister has 2 younger brothers and has had to become the official guardian of her youngest brother, who is a teenager. And her brothers, both brothers, but especially her youngest brother, who she is the guardian of, they don't fully understand how much she's had to sacrifice and how hard it's been on her to become a guardian at such a young age and to be responsible for her younger brother, especially because there is that added complexity that they are Black, and having to be the guardian of a Black teenage boy in the US, when something that comes up over and over again in the book is how much the world seems to want Black boys dead and how hard it is for her to keep him alive against all odds, just constantly fighting for his life. And because it is horror, it does take that to a bit of an extreme, and there's a little bit of a supernatural element. There is a lot of body horror and gore and blood and murder in this book. It is really intense. I just felt like this book did such a great job of portraying that sibling relationship, how complex it is, how contentious it can be, how much love there is, but also resentment from both sides. Kala resents her brother for causing her to have to change her life and live her life basically exclusively for her brother, that she has had to give up some of her dreams and her freedom to care for him and to be his parent, to be his mother. And she also resents her parents for putting her in that position, while her younger brother, Jamie, resents her for acting like his mother when she's not, and for having too many rules, for being too overprotective. You know, whatever it is for him, he feels very constrained and feels that that's not a natural evolution of their relationship. And there's a lack of understanding from both of them for how the other one is feeling and what they're going through. But especially, I felt this book did a great job of portraying Kala and her sacrifice and her deep love and care and how afraid she was for her brothers constantly and how much she had to give up to take care of them, and how the lack of appreciation and the lack of acknowledgement of how hard that was on her and how much it took out of her made it even harder on her and made her so angry and resentful of being put in that position. I thought it was gloriously done. It is such a complex dynamic. It's a really complex idea to explore, but I feel like the fact that it is a horror novel means that the author could really dive into the absurdity of it all, but that really drove home the reality that for Kala, her life is a nightmare. She's trying to keep her 2 younger brothers alive in a world that wants them dead, and that is not a responsibility that ever should have fallen on her shoulders as their sister, and she is sacrificing every bit of herself, literally, to try to keep them alive, and they don't even care. And it's so... Oh God, I'm not even an older sibling. I'm the youngest in my family. I'm a younger sister and I have an older sister, and my experience is so different. I'm not an older sibling. I have never had to be a guardian for a child or a teenager, and yet I felt so viscerally the things that Kala was feeling. I really felt like I was drawn into her experience, and I felt so much empathy for her. I felt her rage. I felt her love. I felt her frustration. She was really beautifully developed as a character. And there are times in this that things went off the wall and I got very confused and I had no idea what was happening. But overall, I thought this was really great. I thought the horror only added to the themes, and it made the whole arc really intense and really visceral and really emotional. And I found the ending incredibly cathartic. I won't say anything else about it because I don't want to spoil it. I do think you should check this out if you ever read horror and you're interested in complicated sibling dynamics. But I thought this was really well done. Really, the only drawback for me was that there were times that I had no idea what was happening. Just complete confusion. I listened to this on audiobook, and I do think that some of these chapters might have been easier to follow if I were reading them with my eyes, because I had to re-listen to a couple parts because I got so confused. But overall, I thought this was gorgeous. I loved the characters. They felt very real. There were also a lot of really funny moments, despite how serious the subject matter is and the fact that it's horror and there's a lot of blood and murder and guts and gore happening. There's a lot of time for humor and levity, and there's a lot of love underpinning everything. And I just thought this was really, really great. And this is a very high 4-star for me. If I did half stars, this would probably be a 4.5-star read. I thought this was was really fantastic, and I'm very excited to read more from this author because this just had so much heart and so much to say about how society treats Black boys specifically, but also how we parentify eldest children, how we parentify elder daughters, and the unreasonable expectations put on people who did not choose to be parents and yet are thrust into that role. Just really, really, really well done. I'm rambling now, I think, but I thought this was great and I really enjoyed it. Okay, and the very last book I finished in February was another one for my fantasy reading vlog, which was When the Moon Hatched. This one I'm gonna not say much about because I have very complicated, conflicted feelings about this book, and it's going to be much easier for you to understand my opinions and my feelings if you watch that reading vlog, because I get into way more detail. But basically, this is romantasy. It is very mismarketed by this cover. It is dark and bloody and gory, and the dragons are barely involved. So don't go off the cover or the premise or how it's described. This definitely follows a lot of romantasy tropes for sure, but I do think it does something really interesting in its past timeline. We have a modern day timeline where we're following our protagonist and the male love interest, but we also have chapters that take place further back in history and we're following a character back then and learning their life story. And that timeline and that character were my favorite part of this book by far. And it was them and also the male love interest, who definitely ties into some overused romantasy tropes, but also felt, you know, uniquely not an asshole for the most part, was a very good cook and actually a very caring, sweet person overall, seemed very kind and compassionate in a way that a lot of romantasy male love interests are not allowed to be because they have to be assholes to everyone, including the female love interest for some reason. And even the protagonist, she again does tie into a lot of tropes of the most beautiful girl you've ever seen. And she's super curvy and dainty, but also the most badass, can take down 20 full-grown men twice her size with weapons because she's just that badass, and she's really sassy all the time. And, you know, she falls into all those tropes. I did find her more likable than a lot of female main characters who have all those qualities, though she did get on my nerves. And the writing style is not great. It is very melodramatic. There's too much alliteration. It's off the wall. I think the author was trying too hard to have this flowery, gorgeous writing style, and it just was a little over the top. I would love to see more of the dragons in the next book. But anyway, all of that to say, I was really pleasantly surprised by aspects of this story, and I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. So I ended up giving it 3 stars, but it's a very contentious, conflicted 3 stars because I also have a lot of criticisms about many aspects of the book, including the writing, which to me was the biggest drawback of this, and the fact that it is so long, probably unnecessarily long. So definitely check out the reading vlog if you want much more detailed thoughts, and it probably easier to follow because I don't know what I even just said. I feel like I tried to be brief and I'm not sure I was. I have very complicated feelings about this book. I probably wouldn't recommend it to most people, but I think for some people they will enjoy it. And I will continue in the series because I am curious to see what happens next, and I hope that we will get more from the dragons and the magic system and the characters, and we'll get more of that development that I wanted in this first book. But it's definitely a little bit of a mess, and it's a very long book, so it might not be worth it to you to wade through that. Okay. But for me, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, and I enjoyed it more than I expected, despite all of my many criticisms, which I lay out in detail in my reading vlog, so you can check that out. But I gave it 3 stars. It was better than I thought it would be. So those are all the books I finished in February. Some hits, some misses, some stuff in the middle that was sort of meh. Fine. I'm happy to say that now, me in the future, halfway through March, I have been reading a lot more books that I just want to read now that I'm done with the Goodreads challenge, and I feel like I'm having a much better experience overall with the books I'm reading. So look forward to a more overall positive wrap up next month. But that is it from me. Thank you for watching. Give this video a like if you liked it, and subscribe for more videos from me. Thank you again to Ladder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the link in my description box to get up to 33% off your subscription to Ladder. And with that, I'm gonna get going. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.